When John Lennon released Plastic Ono Band in 1970, he had a lot to get off his chest. A former Beatle, he felt typecast. How would anyone ever see him any differently? Solo careers are often hit or miss, but to leave one of the most prolific bands of all time to try to become successful on his own, the pressure must have been enormous. Lennon had been releasing songs with McCartney for years. Could he really credit only his own name? Who even was he without the Beatles? And furthermore, what songs was he going to sing? John knew he had to find his own voice again. To do so, he tries answering these questions the best he can in the song God. Lennon starts the song with a line that feels akin to a Buddhist koan. God is a concept by which we measure our pain. We twist that sentence around in our heads, trying to understand. John knows we're having trouble, so he literally sings, "I'll say it again," and then does. God is a concept by which we measure our pain. Deep. What the hell does he mean by that? He doesn't even give us any more time to think about it either. Instead, Lennon goes on a tirade, explaining how he doesn't believe in many things, listing them one by one by one. He starts with something less controversial, magic, but it doesn't take long before he moves into more controversial ones, saying that he doesn't believe in the Bible, Jesus, the Buddha, and many other religious symbols as well. In addition, he also names actual people, Hitler, Kennedy, and even Elvis. At this point, the listener is understandably confused. Is John really refuting that Kennedy or Hitler existed? We easily can prove that they did. So why is he doing this? What's the point? For these answers, let's go back to that deep phrase he threw at us at the beginning of the song. We've had some time to think about it. It's time now to unpack it. He explained that God was a concept in which we measure our pain. So in the same respect, when he says he doesn't believe in Hitler, Kennedy, and Elvis, he's referring to them not as people, but as concepts. When Lennon sings that he doesn't believe in Kennedy, he's saying how one may look at Kennedy like a god. I know, that sounds a little weird. The guy who had allegedly adulterous relationships with Marilyn Monroe is God? Stay with me here. In that introductory sentence, Lennon also uses the word measure. In this case, he's referring to how one can use a god to ease themselves of some of the pain they feel. So, when a person conceptualizes another person or idea as a god, Lennon is arguing they typically do so for that purpose, again, to ease their pain. If you're still having trouble believing this, think about how many people still talk about Kennedy as a savior when it came to the Cuban Missile Crisis, or how somebody might say that Elvis got them through a rough time. There's nothing necessarily right or wrong in doing this, but in John's case, he doesn't like it. He argues instead when humans elevate their religion, leaders, or pop stars in this way to a godlike concept to ease themselves of their own issues, they've lost their power as human beings. How do we know that's what he's getting at? Because he completes the tirade list with the Beatles themselves. No one can attest better than John that for the 60s, the Beatles were more than just a band. Yes, they were a concept. They were and still are synonymous with hippie culture, the British invasion, and to a larger extent, the decade of the 60s themselves. John Lennon literally said in 1966, "The Beatles are bigger than Jesus." He's very aware how people see the Beatles as a touchstone of cultural reverence. So how does John break free of that concept? He has to denounce it, just like everything else in that list. The more you try to reform and reshape what something is, the more you give your power to it. If John Lennon spent this entire song talking about the Beatles, it would give more power to the band in this way as a concept. Instead, by putting them in a list with Jesus, Elvis, and Kennedy, he's able to diminish their power and explain that they're no longer a part of him or where he takes solace. This is all to lead up to one of the most important lines of the song, or dare I say, even the album. The music cuts out, allowing John to sing this line with no accompaniment, driving home the point further. I just believe in me. In this line, John has removed himself from all these concepts, realizing that the only way that he can measure pain is with himself. The music starts back up, and he can't help but admit that maybe Yoko too. He sings the next line. That's just reality. There's an almost wistfulness in his voice when he does this, wishing it weren't true, but he knows deep down inside it is. The song finishes up with Lennon ripping the band-aid off entirely, chiseling himself away from the Beatles' iconography. He sings, "I was the Dreamweaver, but now I'm reborn. I was the Walrus, but now I am John." The Walrus, of course, is a reference to the song Lennon sang with the Beatles, I am the walrus. He uses this symbol not only for its familiarity, but because all of them originally dressed up on the cover of Magical Mystery Tour as different animals. And of course, one of them was a walrus. The costume was worn by none other than John Lennon. So, to a larger extent, this symbol is meant to tell us, hey, I used to be part of the Beatles, but that's done. That's over with. Sorry. I'm not that person anymore. Please don't think of me like that. When you listen to my lyrics now, think of me without that group. Think of me who I am, John. He doesn't even use his last name here in an attempt to make himself feel more human, because just like the Beatles, he doesn't want anyone to elevate him to a concept. There are many who try to strike out and do a solo career. Some have enormous success, others flounder, but few decide to look right at us through the music in such a self-aware way to tell us how they really feel. Regardless of what you think about this album and John Lennon's solo career, I urge you to remember that to write a song like this takes bravery. Why? Because he knows. Some people just won't get this. Others will just see him as an atheist for denouncing God. But he hopes, like that first line, you'll think about it. And hopefully, unlike the Beatles, see the man for who he is, choosing not to elevate him to another concept. What do you think about the song God? Tell me in the comments below. If you haven't heard this album, I cannot suggest it enough. It's not only fantastic, but truly confessional. Another track off the album, Working Man, blew my mind the first time I heard it. I almost considered doing the video about that song. If you like this kind of stuff, please like and subscribe. The only way I can continue doing this is with your love and support. Thank you so much for watching. Hope this helps. I love you all.